This past weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway was one of those races that was hard to watch if you are a true NASCAR fan. It did not feel clean or exciting. It felt messy, tense, and uncomfortable. The kind of race where you can feel something is about to go wrong, and then it does, more than once. And the strange thing is, what happened on the track was only half the story. What was happening inside the team, on the radios, behind the scenes, was just as bad, maybe even worse. There are two big stories coming out of this weekend, and both of them matter a lot more than they might look at first. If you are someone who watches NASCAR every single week, who follows every race, every storyline, every driver, then this channel is built for you. We are NASCAR Nation Report, and we are working hard to grow this community to 15,000 real fans who live and breathe this sport just like we do. If that sounds like you, hit that like button right now and subscribe to the channel. We are just getting started, and we do not want you to miss a single thing. Now let us get into it. The name at the center of everything this weekend was Kyle Busch, and what happened to him at the Food City 500 at Bristol was not just a rough afternoon. It felt like every single thing that has gone wrong this season all came crashing together at the same time. The car was not working. The team was tense. And then things got physical on the track with another driver. By the end of the day, it was hard to watch, and even harder to explain if you remember what Kyle Busch used to look like at a track like Bristol. Let us start with what happened on the track itself. Kyle Busch was driving the number 8 Chevrolet for Richard Childress Racing, and from very early in the race, it was clear the car just did not have what it needed. Busch was on the radio constantly talking about rear grip. He could not get the car to rotate through the corners the way he needed to. He could not carry speed. Every lap was a fight. Every corner was a struggle. And when you are driving a car that is not responding the way it should, it takes a toll on you physically and mentally as the laps pile up. To make things worse, Busch had started the race from 29th position, which already put him in a tough spot before the green flag even dropped. Getting through traffic, avoiding incidents, and trying to work your way forward is hard enough when the car is good. When the car is off, it is nearly impossible. So Busch was already deep in the pack, already frustrated, and already fighting just to stay out of trouble. Then came the first big incident. On lap 3-13, Riley Herbst, driving the number 35 Toyota, made contact with Busch and spun him around. Now, whether that was intentional or just aggressive racing, it does not really matter in the moment. What matters is what it did to Kyle Busch's race and his mindset. Getting spun while you are already running near the back, in a car that is not handling right, after starting 29th, is the kind of thing that can break a driver's focus for the rest of the afternoon, and you could feel it from that moment on. Fast forward to lap 498, close to the end of the race. Busch made heavy contact with Herbst and spun him around this time. It brought out the 9th caution of the race, which was the final caution, and it had a real impact on how the race finished. The moment everybody saw it, the reaction was immediate. It looked like payback. It looked like a driver who had been holding something in all day and finally let it out. Fans were not pleased. Whether you agreed with it or not, it was the kind of move that gets people talking for all the wrong reasons when you are already in the middle of a rough season. It did not help Kyle Busch's image, and it only added more fuel to the fire surrounding his 2025 campaign. Now here is where the story gets deeper. And honestly, this is the part that matters more in the long run. While all of this was playing out on the track, things were getting heated inside the number 8 team. The radio exchanges between crew chief Jim Pullman and spotter Derek Nelland were not the kind of calm, focused communication you want to hear from a team that is trying to solve problems under pressure. At one point during the race, Pullman was trying to understand what was happening with the car. He was asking whether the car was tight, whether it was loose, whether it was plowing or moving sideways. He was trying to get information so he could make the right call. And Nelland responded by saying he has a headset on, not a helmet, and that he simply does not know. Now, that exchange right there tells you a lot about where this team is mentally. A spotter's job is to be the eyes of the driver on the track. When the crew chief is pressing for answers and the spotter is struggling to give them, that is a sign of a team that is not communicating well under pressure. After the spin involving Herbst, the tone on the radio shifted slightly. Nelland tried to be the calming voice. He acknowledged that everyone was frustrated, but told the team that yelling at each other was not going to help and that they needed to stay together because the race was not over. That was a reasonable thing to say, but then Pullman responded with something that really stood out. He said, "It is the same thing every week. That is not just frustration about one bad afternoon. That is the sound of someone who feels like they are stuck in a loop with no way out." That phrase carries a lot of weight. It tells you this is not a new problem. It tells you this is something that has been building up over time and is only now starting to come out in the open. And when you look at the numbers, it is hard to argue with that feeling. Kyle Busch finished 25th at Bristol, 2 laps down. That result continued a run of form that has been genuinely difficult to watch for fans of one of NASCAR's most decorated drivers. He has now had 4 straight finishes outside the top 20. Las Vegas was bad. Darlington was bad. Martinsville was bad. And now Bristol. In 8 races this season, he has not had a single top 10 finish. Not one. His best result in 2025 is a 12th place finish at Circuit of the Americas. That is it. That is the best he has managed so far this year. In the standings, Busch currently sits 24th with 131 points. He is 46 points below the playoff cut line right now. For a driver who is trying to compete for a spot in the playoffs, that gap is significant, and it is only going to get harder to close as the season moves forward. The pressure to perform is not going away. It is only going to increase with every race that passes without a strong result. What makes all of this even more striking is the history. Kyle Busch is a 2-time Cup Series champion. He is one of the most successful drivers in NASCAR history when it comes to raw numbers. And Bristol specifically is a track where he has been absolutely dominant over the years. He has won 8 times at Bristol in the Cup Series alone. Across all national series at that track, his win total is 22. 22 wins at one track. That is a level of dominance that very few drivers in the history of the sport can claim at any single venue. So to see him struggling this much at a track he used to own, finishing 2 laps down and getting into on-track incidents, is genuinely jarring. This winless streak is also worth putting into perspective. Busch has not won a race since 2023. That streak now sits at 101 races without a victory. For most drivers on the grid, a 101 race winless streak would not be as remarkable simply because they have not won that many times overall. But for Kyle Busch, a driver with his track record, his talent, and his history of winning at a high rate, this stretch feels deeply out of character. It is hard to look at that number and not feel like something is seriously wrong. And then there is the contract situation. Kyle Busch's deal with Richard Childress Racing runs through the end of the 2026 season. That means right now, there is still time but not infinite time. If the performance does not improve, if the results do not start coming in, then conversations about the future are going to get more complicated. This is not just about winning races. It is about demonstrating that the combination of this driver and this team can compete at the level that both sides want. Right now, based on what we have seen so far in 2025, that conversation is not easy to have. Pour on track results, internal team tension, radio drama, fan frustration, no wins, no top tens, and a contract that will eventually need to be addressed. That is a difficult combination of pressures to be dealing with all at the same time. After the race, Busch handled things professionally in his comments. He said the team fought the car all day, that they kept losing track position and could not recover from it, and that they would keep working to try to turn things around heading into Kansas. That is the right thing to say publicly, and you get the sense that he means it. Busch is not the kind of driver who gives up. He never has been. His career has been defined by intensity and a refusal to accept losing as something permanent. But there is a difference between keeping your head up and actually solving the problem. And right now, based on everything we have seen, the problem has not been solved. Looking at this honestly, this does not feel like a rough patch anymore. A rough patch is 2 bad races, maybe 3. A rough patch is when one thing is off and you fix it and move forward. What we are looking at with Kyle Busch and Richard Childress racing right now is something different. 4 straight finishes outside the top 20, 8 races without a top 10, over 100 races without a win, a crew chief and spotter exchanging tense words on the radio mid-race, an on-track retaliation incident that brought out a late caution, and a contract situation hanging over everything. That is not a rough patch. That is a storm. The biggest red flag of all, honestly, is not the finishing positions. It is the communication breakdown inside the team. NASCAR is a sport built on chemistry. The driver, the crew chief, the spotter, the engineers, everyone has to be working together and trusting each other under pressure. When you hear the kind of exchanges that came out of that number 8 radio at Bristol, it tells you that chemistry is not where it needs to be right now. When frustration is spilling out mid-race, when people are snapping at each other while the car is still on the track, that is a warning sign that goes beyond setups and aerodynamics. That is a people problem, and people problems are harder to fix than mechanical ones. The retaliation on Riley Herbst also says something about where Busch's head is right now. This is a driver who has always been fierce and competitive. He has never been shy about letting his emotions show. But making that kind of move late in a race you are already struggling in the middle of a season where you desperately need positive momentum, is not the move of a driver who feels like things are under control. That is a driver who has been pushed to his limit and reacted. You can understand it as a human being, but in terms of what it does for his season and his image, it only makes things harder. Everything now shifts to what comes next. The race at Kansas is the immediate opportunity to respond. One good result will not fix everything, but it would at least show that the team can bounce back. It would give everyone inside that garage, and outside of it, something to hold on to. The playoffs are getting closer with every passing race, and the window to get into contention is not going to stay open forever. If Busch and RCR can find something in the next few weeks, if they can figure out what is wrong with the car, rebuild the communication between driver and crew, and put together some solid finishes, then this rough stretch becomes a chapter in the season rather than the whole story. But if things continue the way they have been going, If the results do not improve, if the tension inside the team keeps building, and if the winless streak keeps growing, then this season could become something that has real and lasting consequences for Kyle Busch's career and for the future of this partnership with Richard Childress Racing. That is not something anyone on that team wants, and it is not something fans of Kyle Busch want to see either.